And let me ask you, what does real faith look like? And it's something we've been talking about in the book of James. And for today's second helping, I want to dive into a part of the book of James in chapter 2 that I couldn't get to this weekend. When we do these second helpings, it's always about putting a little bit more on your plate, something that maybe didn't get out during the message. And if you look at walking through any book, there's so much in it, especially when you talk about James. In James chapter 2, we just couldn't get to all of it this weekend. There's a theme where he's talking about authentic love and what our actions should look like based on the love that we have from Christ. A couple of the verses that I brought out was James 2, chapter 2, verse 14, where he says, "What good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say that you have faith, but you don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone?" He's saying, like, we love to talk about how much faith we have. We love to talk about how much we love God and how much we're a follower of God, but then we don't act like it. He comes later in verse 18, he says, "Some of you may argue, well, some people have faith and some people have good deeds," as if though you could divide it, like some people are being big in their beliefs and some people are just doing the right thing. He replies by saying, "But I say, how can you show me your faith if you don't have any good deeds? I will show you my faith by my good deeds." We talked about this in church, but what I didn't get to in this past weekend's message was how he ends the book of James, the second chapter of James, with verses 21 through 26. In verse 21, he starts one of two illustrations, and he's trying to demonstrate faith through actions. And so he gives the illustration of Abraham, and then he gives the illustration of Rahab. With Abraham, he says this in verse 21. "Don't you remember that our ancestor Abraham was shown to be right with God by his actions when he offered his son Isaac on the altar?" Right by his actions is talking about being justified. Abraham was justified in his relationship with God, was made right with God by the fact that he was willing to go offer his son, his very precious, very valuable son Isaac, the son he loves so much. God says, "Hey, I want you to be willing to give Isaac up." So Abraham walks up to this altar to sacrifice his son, and James continues in verse 22. He says, "You see his faith," talking about Abraham, "his faith and his actions work together. His actions made his faith complete." And it's the fact that Abraham believed in God and trusted God enough to be willing to sacrifice his only son. God wasn't interested in human sacrifice. God's never wanted human sacrifice. Don't get lost in the sauce here on why would the Bible call this and why would God want that. God wanted Abraham to demonstrate that he actually truly trusted God. And the thing that Abraham loved most was his only son, Isaac. And so God said, "Be willing to give up your only son." And when Abraham was willing to do that, it demonstrated his faith, his trust in God. By the way, he doesn't end up killing Isaac because God didn't want him to kill Isaac. God actually stops him from killing Isaac. But when it comes to sacrificing your only son, that is something that God did for us. God allowed his only son, Jesus Christ, to be sacrificed in our place. So Abraham was just a picture of what God was actually going to do. Abraham didn't have to sacrifice Isaac, but he demonstrated that he was willing. His faith actually had actions, actually had a step to it. It says, and so it happened in the scriptures, just as the scriptures say, Abraham believed God and God counted him as righteous because of his faith. He's even called the friend of God. He finishes that by saying, "So you see, we are shown to be right with God by what we do, not by faith alone." He's not saying that you're saved by works. He's saying that your faith demonstrates your works. But faith is always going to require risk. So here's what I'd like you to hear in this short little second helping. The Abraham piece is this: faith without risk is really no faith at all. A lot of people say, "I have faith." It only takes faith if there's something scary. It only requires faith if you can't make sense of it. It only requires you to have faith in God if you can't do it on your own. See, he had to demonstrate faith by saying, "God, I believe that God's got a better plan for me to go forward, even if my lineage stops with Isaac. God promised me that he would do these great things through my descendants, and yet God's also asking me give up my only son, Isaac. So how can that be possible? Abraham couldn't make it make sense, but his faith led him to go forward. If you're going forward in your life and you've made it make sense and you've got all the answers, that's not faith. That's reason. That's calculation, but it's not faith. Faith is going to require risk. And Abraham demonstrates that to us. But the last illustration that James ends the chapter 2 with, he ends it with these last two verses, and he doesn't just talk about Abraham, he talks about Rahab. In verse 25, he says, Rahab the prostitute is another example. She was shown to be right with God by her actions when she hid those messengers, talking about these spies that came in to Jericho. She hid them and then sent them safely away on a different road. Just as the body is dead without breath, so also faith is dead without our good works. This is how he ends this. Now, if you want to hear more about Rahab, I'll probably put a link on the bottom here. There was a message that I did called Restore back in December of 2022, and that was all on Rahab. It's such a beautiful story how Rahab is brought into the story of Jesus. This prostitute in Jericho trusts God enough to go against her city, to hide the very spies that were there to destroy Jericho. She goes against her tradition. She goes against the pagan gods. She goes against everything she knew to trust this God of the Hebrews, this Yahweh God. And in doing so, and in hiding the slaves, and going against culture, she demonstrates her faith. And when you have that kind of faith, it's radical, it's extreme. But here's what I want you to hear. Radical faith rescues, redeems, and redirects. Rahab displays this radical faith in a time when nobody else was willing to trust that the God of Israel was real. They hid behind their walls in Jericho. She says, no, I'm trusting that that's the real God. I'm trusting that that's the God I should be serving. And so she has this radical faith. And what it does is it rescues her from being destroyed. And that's true for you and I today. Real faith, radical faith will rescue us. God says that we're all doomed for hell unless we accept Jesus Christ. So the faith in Christ actually rescues us from that. And it can rescue us from some of the stuff that's going on right here, right now, by the way. But it also redeems. Here's a prostitute in a pagan country that not only joins the Israelites, but she's in the lineage of King David. She's like the great-great-grandmother of King David. And that also puts her in the lineage of Jesus. She becomes one of the great-great-great-great-great-grandmothers of Jesus Christ. So you talk about faith, not just rescuing her, to have your story redeemed, to go from being a prostitute in this horrible pagan country of Jericho to being in the lineage of the Messiah. That's radical faith, and that's what God does. And that's also why I say it redirects. Her life was completely different after her radical faith. She didn't do what she used to do. And if you're willing to step into real faith today, I believe God will redirect you. For some of you, it means starting a relationship with Jesus for the first time. That will totally redirect, totally rescue you, totally redeem you on a spiritual level, unlike anything you've ever seen. But there's a lot of you that are watching this and you're already believers. I think your faith in God is going to give you a new path. Maybe even today, as you watch this, God's saying, hey, I've got more for you to do. Just trust me. Risk it like Abraham did, and then allow me to redeem you. Allow me to redirect you. Allow me to do something new, big, and bold with your life. I hope that you can lean into this story. Go read James 2, start to finish. It'll only take you a few minutes. And just hear what it is that God might have for you on faith that demonstrates itself in good deeds and actions. I'm praying that this blesses you, and I hope to see you soon. Have a good one.